Please like, share and subscribe. Echoes Untold. The tragic wreck of the Batavia, 1629, a tale of mutiny, murder, and survival in the early 17th century. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, dominated global trade, sending ships across treacherous oceans to secure valuable spices and goods from the East Indies, modern-day Indonesia. These voyages were dangerous, marked by storms, disease, and human error. Yet, none would compare to the horrors of the Batavia, a disaster that combined shipwreck, mutiny, and mass murder into one of the most infamous maritime tragedies in history. The Batavia, a magnificent vessel of the VOC, set sail from Amsterdam on October 28, 1628. It carried over 340 people, including sailors, soldiers, merchants, and civilians, men, women, and children, along with a valuable cargo of silver coins, gold, and precious jewels. Commanding the ship was Francisco Pelsart, a senior merchant, while Arian Jacobs served as captain. However, a sinister presence was also on board, Jeronimus Cornelisz, a disgraced apothecary fleeing accusations of heresy. From the start, the voyage was plagued by tension and misfortune. The relationship between Pelsart and Jacobs was strained, distrust brewed, and discipline faltered. Cornelisz, charismatic and manipulative, took advantage of the discord, sowing seeds of rebellion among discontented crew members. He envisioned mutiny, the murder of officers, the seizure of the ship's vast treasure, and the establishment of a rogue colony on a distant island where he could rule unopposed. As the Batavia sailed southward into the Indian Ocean, tragedy struck. On June 4, 1629, under Jacobs's inattentive navigation, the ship veered off course and crashed violently into a coral reef off the coast of Western Australia near the Houtman-Abrolhos Islands. The ship's hull was torn apart. Panic erupted as seawater flooded the lower decks, drowning many of those trapped below. Over 100 people perished in the chaos. Those who survived scrambled for safety, abandoning the wreck and making their way to nearby islands in small lifeboats. Among the survivors were Pelsart, Cornelisz, Jacobs, sailors, soldiers, and civilians, including women and children. The islands, however, offered no fresh water or food, making survival uncertain. Desperate to seek help, Pelsart and a handful of men took the ship's longboat and embarked on an epic 1,500-mile journey to Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. It was an astonishing feat of navigation and endurance. For the remaining survivors stranded on the barren islands, though, a new nightmare began. With Pelsart gone, Jeronimus Cornelisz seized control. He quickly turned the survivors' plight into a reign of terror. Under his leadership, a group of loyal mutineers emerged. Cornelisz's first move was to eliminate anyone who might oppose him. He confiscated weapons and began systematically murdering men, women, and children under various pretexts. The violence escalated to unspeakable levels. Over the next several weeks, Cornelisz and his followers slaughtered over 120 people. Defenseless women were enslaved and subjected to horrific abuse. Children were killed to conserve resources. Anyone who defied Cornelisz or was seen as a burden was executed. The survivors lived in constant terror, with no way to escape the small islands that had become their prison. However, not everyone succumbed to Cornelisz's tyranny. A group of loyal soldiers, led by a man named Weeb Hayes, managed to escape to a neighboring island. There, they discovered a small source of food and water and began preparing to fight back. Using improvised weapons, Hayes and his men resisted Cornelisz's attempts to bring them under control. Meanwhile, Pelsart had reached Batavia and returned with a rescue ship. When he arrived at the islands, he was met with a horrifying sight. Bodies littered the ground, and survivors were traumatized and starving. Cornelisz and his mutineers were captured, and justice was swift. Pelsart held a tribunal on the spot. Jeronimus Cornelisz, along with his most loyal followers, was tortured and executed, his hands cut off before he was hanged. Some mutineers were abandoned on the mainland of Australia, left to their fate. Of the 340 people who had set sail on the Batavia, fewer than 120 survived the ordeal. The survivors' harrowing accounts revealed not only the horrors of the shipwreck but also the monstrous depths of human cruelty. The wreck of the Batavia remains one of the darkest and most chilling maritime tragedies in history. Over the years, divers have recovered parts of the ship, along with artifacts and skeletal remains, from the coral reef where it met its fate. The site now serves as a reminder of the dangers of 17th-century seafaring and the horrors that human desperation can unleash. Today, the Batavia's story is preserved in museums, literature, and history, a haunting tale of greed, mutiny, and survival against all odds. Proof that the greatest dangers at sea are not always the storms or the waves, but the darkness that can lie within the human soul. Please like, share, and subscribe Echoes Untold.